that teenagers can feel often surprises the child and parents equally. Peers are important, school is important, teachers are important, and to top all that, the opinion of these people also matter to them. Here, I would like to expand. Can we move to next slide?
Yes.
I would like to expand a little more, as a lot of questions that we received were directed towards self-esteem and self-concept. What is self-esteem? It is what a teenager thinks of himself, the global evaluation of self. Positive self-esteem is a series of positive thoughts about himself. It is not one thought. It is a series of thoughts in different domains that stay positive over a period of time. So it is very common to have low self-esteem in teenage years till they figure out their lives, and it's often temporary. We think of self-esteem in 5 of life domains. Doing well and developing skills in each domain helps the child. And I've mentioned some of those domains and highlighted the ones that are important to teenagers in red. Like the domains of academics, sports are well developed in adulthood, and childhood. The two new domains that become important in teenage years is social approval and physical appearance. Conquering these domains have often been shown to really improve thoughts into a positive direction. Ongoing support from parents and close friends probably matter, but cannot beat when classmates or teachers or coaches show approval. And that is where the social domain becomes very important. Older adolescents respond better to more adult-oriented themes like romantic appeal, job confidence. And how do we build self-esteem in our adolescence? The first step is to identify the domain that the child thinks will boost him. It's not what you think will boost him, it is what the child thinks, because this is about self, this is about ourselves. And as a parent, we can help him build skills in this domain. Now, to identify the domain, it requires a very back and forth communication between a parent and the child, or any mentor and a child, helping him build skills in domains that he thinks he's lacking into. For example, a girl says, I'm not pretty. But let's see, go shopping, go to a beauty parlor, teach her skills for physical presentation. There are things like body image, there are things like academics. Basically help the child build skills in this domain. The child goes out, achieves with a good outcome, and the social approval from classmates and teachers has to happen to complete the loop. Once you have completed the entire loop, you fixed it. The self-esteem will be up there. Now, this is often a solution for temporary loss of self-esteem, which we see encountered in adolescent years. However, there are some kids who will have prolonged or multiple domain issues, which can contribute to more pathological issues. And at this time, I would like to invite Dr. Pramit Rastogi to address these issues. Over to you, Pramit.
So thank you, Dr. Sarika. So I'll just take over from where Dr. Sarika left in terms of self-esteem is something that all teenagers will struggle with as they find themselves. So yeah, thank you. So let's expect it to happen and not worry too much about it. And as Dr. Sarika said, create the scaffolding so that they can come out of it. Now, when we are talking about self-esteem, what's happening? There is low self-worth, meaning why would people want to talk to me? I'm not good in academics, sports, looks. I might not add up to somebody who's successful. And because the center of self-esteem shifts from home to outside, it doesn't matter if the mother is saying you are the best or you're the smartest or you're the most intelligent. It has to come from outside. And so if somebody is struggling a little bit with not feeling worth it, they will be more at risk for being affected by peer pressure. So if an adolescent is asked to smoke a cigarette or smoke some weed, if they really want to belong, they will succumb to it, even if they know that that's not what my parents want, and maybe I should not do this for another few years. And you can see how there will be more defiance, because the parents are saying, you know the rules of the house, but the child is basically saying to the parents, it doesn't matter because something much more critical is at stake. My self-esteem is at stake and you can't help me in that. I have to figure it on my own. So this is how the self-esteem sort of goes into peer pressure, defiance that a lot of parents struggle with. Oftentimes, depression comes up. So we wanted to connect something that every teenager goes through to something that every parent worries about the teenager to get to, depression. So a lot of self-esteem struggles might look like depression, like worthlessness, hopelessness, low self-worth, anger, irritability. All these things are symptoms of depression. But depression also involves the body, the physical body also showing symptoms, which means things like decrease in appetite or increase in appetite, inability to enjoy the pizza that would light your child's face up, sometimes crying for no reason, or sometimes not being able to do simple things like, even picking up a glass of water. Now, a lot of teenagers don't want to pick up a glass of water. This has to be a shift in baseline functioning. That if a child was struggling a little bit with self-esteem issues, but overall was, doing fine from a body standpoint, and now is feeling very lazy or is feeling and sad. So all of this has to happen together at the same time for us to be concerned about depression. So as I said here, now point number one here could be just self-esteem, and point number two here would be, so depression would be these two subheadings. So the low self-worth, worthlessness, hopelessness, and along with changes in body functions, that would be depression. And because suicide has been sort of a hot topic right now, because there was an important actor in Bollywood who recently committed suicide, I want to briefly talk about suicide. If a parent is, and I'll use Dr. Sarika's 3 C's here, if they are connected, if they are communicating, and if they are collaborative, right? So if you know what your child is doing, if they know that there's nothing they can do that will upset you, to the nth level, if there is some safety, and if their self-esteem is being worked on, or you understand that it is a concern, if there is no clear depression, then the distance between self-esteem difficulties that every teenager struggles with and suicide, which some people end up, committing, the distance is very, very long. It's a long road, and there are multiple places where a parent and society can intervene. Whenever in clinic I see children who are considering or thinking about suicide, I think that is because some of these safety mechanisms are not built. Because when they're coming to clinic to us, they already are looking for help that they were not getting in their immediate social circle. Whereas I can bet that everybody in their social network, the parents especially, will be very, very invested to help them. So later in the talk, I think we'll get to what else can be done to reduce this gap. But keep in mind connection, communication, and collaboration. We wanted to also talk about screen time, because that's also a question that came up a lot. I know that we sort of suddenly stopped the depression, suicide issue. If it is relevant and if there are questions, we can take it in the end.
Dr. Pramit, may I just, sorry, participants, some of you are raising your hands. I'd request you to not do that at the moment. There seems to be a challenge in the chat. We're just working on that. So once these next few minutes are over, we will definitely find a way to get you to share your questions with us. So please don't raise your hands at the moment. Thank you. Dr. Pramit, all yours.
Okay, thank you. So screen time is a big issue. And I think I want to invite all of you to first reflect, as I'm speaking, on your own struggles with screen time. Okay, because till we understand our own difficulties with it, we will always come from a place of, why can't you shut off the screen? What's your problem? Don't you understand you need to study? So think in your mind, how many times have you opened the Amazon website at work and ordered something for home? Or at home, trying to quickly complete some work email that you left, work without completing. So we struggle because there is now, screen time is sort of a wagon wheel. So think of a wheel with multiple spokes or a pie chart, that the screen is everything from studying, researching, chatting, collaboration, So even if you have an assignment to be done at school, you'll likely be making a small WhatsApp group, right? I mean, for this talk, we made a WhatsApp group so that we could coordinate. So playing video games, social media, so all of these things form screen time. So knowing what your child's wagon wheel or pie chart of that screen time is very critical. And to control screen time, you have to understand that wagon wheel. You should know that these are the 10 things he could or she could be doing. Don't assume that it is going to either be social media or video games, because if you don't ask, a teenager is the first person to shut down and not talk to you about it and just judge you. That, all right, you think I'm chatting? Fine, I'm chatting. They will not say, but I'm doing this. Also keep in mind what we was talking about, peer pressure. If a child is wanting to belong and that is more critical for him than or her than grades, then they will fight you. I can tell from my experience that I was in 11th grade, I moved to the hostel, and that year my grades fell because that year academics was less important. Not getting ragged in the hostel when there were 2 batches to rag me was more important for me. So peer pressure dictated my academic actions. So know your kids' screen time wagon wheel. Also, last 2 topics, last 2 issues. So screen time is here to stay, right? In so many different ways, we all have to deal with screen time. Self-regulating, meaning when should we stop? When is the right time to stop doing one activity? That's when you have to help. So whether your child is playing video games for 4 hours or 5 hours, it doesn't matter. What matters is, even if it is 5 hours, can they stop 3 times during that video games without losing it? Do you understand the timeline of that video game? Do you understand how long that online video game lasts? So it's a combination of understanding them and helping them be able to stop something that is very, very exciting, because you have to train them to deal with highly addictive and highly enjoyable stuff. And while screen time gets a huge, sort of negative rap, but keep in mind that my grandfather used to say that during his time, people used to read the book Chandrakanta, which used to be pulp fiction kind of a book, at the end of the class. So this was in the 1930s. There was still something like screen time that was making people sit in the back of the class and read a book. Okay. When I was growing up, I think of cell phones and regular phones. That's what we used to do, just stick to the phone. So screen time is just one other kind, but a bigger monster. But it follows the same pattern that teenagers really like it, they really want it, and over time we have to help them get control over it. But it will only happen if we understand them and if we can help them while negotiating things like the multiple kind of wagon, the wagon wheel, understanding the peer pressure and things of that nature. So I think, is there a, yeah. Should I continue, Mandeep, or should we pause and take questions? Because I'm trying to keep track of time.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just go on to a brief share which Ishmeet has about the career counseling, and then we'll move on to questions.
I like that idea. Yeah, good.
So I'll now ask Ishmeet Bagga to take us through a very brief thing about how, as parents, we can help our children with their higher education and career planning. Ishmeet, over to you. Ishmeet, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So what I'm going to talk about is that how we need to do the career planning for our kids. So as you can all see, there's a picture that I've shared on the screen. So this is a very extremely powerful picture that we have. So what this picture tells me is that every child is different. They have a different potential. They have a different potential to learn. And what we do not want to do is put them into the same mold that the society, this is what the society wants, and that is how we should plan the future of your child. We should not do that. What we need to focus is the strong foundation. What we need to focus is that how we build a strong foundation for a child so that, the child is ready to face all the challenges for the future planning. What we can actually do is plan a future for them, But like we all are aware that future is very uncertain, like we are all struggling with COVID problems. And right now, all our kids are doing homeschooling. So this is something very unplanned. What we can actually do is we can plan a structured process for them. So for planning the structured process, what we can do is we can, plan the self-awareness, how they're going to explore the options, the various options which are available, and obviously how we are going to build upon those options that are there. So what we can actually do is we can make them do, there are so many options which are available. So we make them do the research about those options. And what we can do is we can help them this by doing the psychometric assessments. We have various kind of psychometric tools, assessments available from grade 5 to college students, which will help them understand their interest, their abilities, and what are the kind of abilities that they have with these various tools. Okay, so what we can do is, parents, don't worry on that. What we can actually focus is what is available to us and how we can guide our kids to plan their future.
Thank you very much, Ishmeet and Dr. Sarika and Dr. Pramit. I think now we'll just move on to questions. While we do have some questions which have come in, I believe there is some issue with the chat option. We'll just getting that figured out. But at the same time, I'll just share some questions that we had received from participants when they had registered. And maybe you could start answering those while I get the chat option figured out. Is that okay with you, Dr. Pramit and Dr. Sarika? I think both of you need to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so the first, or one very common question that came up to us was in terms of building trust with children. Their parents were torn between being friends to their children and being a parent. How do they get the child to listen to them when they are, taking decisions? How do they get the child to trust the parents' decisions? So if you could just, share some tips on that. And participants, I'm going to get the chat option sorted out. Just bear with me for a few more minutes, but till then we'll have these questions being answered. So Dr. Pramit, Dr. Sarika, if either of you could take this question, please.
I can start. So I think the question is how to get the parents to listen to the child. So in my last slide, I had this comment that said, Gyan mat do, dhyan do, which means don't preach, listen. Mandeep also mentioned, and Ishmeet also touched upon it, that there are lots of careers that we don't know about that will be coming up in the future. So it is likely that the child is who we need to take the lead of. They might know what the things are, what things are coming up. So before we get into our worries about what the child is doing, understanding what they are thinking. So even if we are planning for them, it will begin with asking them a lot about what are the options, what are they hearing from their friends. So I would even put this question back on the parents, is like, have you spoken to enough people their age before telling them what to do? And so I want to see if Ishmeet and Sarika want to.
That's interesting. So
it's about communication. It's about a free flow of communication between parent and child. The teenager needs to feel safe when they're coming to you and chatting with you, and not be judged. And that is one of the 3 C's we were talking about: communication, connection, and collaboration. And you cannot take this independent on your own, decisions about the child's life on your own. You have to collaborate with the child. The child has to participate in the decision making of what they're going to do next.
Okay, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that it's really about the parent trusting the child in the first place to have those conversations with them. And that is only when the child would also end up trusting them back. In simple words, is that a first step?
Yes, and it is not something that will just show up in 1 or 2 days. The process has to start when they're 8, 9, 10 years old, when they're starting to develop abstract thinking, when they're going through So it's a communication and collaboration. So this is some hard work.
Okay, fair enough. Ishmeet, would you like to add something on
Yeah,
that?
I think it's very important to communicate with the child. You need to understand, like even when we have to do some kind of a career planning, you need to understand what the child wants, what is his interest. We can't go back by the same logic, that my father was a doctor, so I should become, or my child should become a doctor. So we need to understand what the child wants, what is the interest that the child has. It's very important to communicate at all stages.
Okay, great. Participants, I think the chat issue is not yet resolved. So I'm just going to take one more question from our earlier bank of questions that many of you have put in. And then maybe you can raise your hands and I'd ask you to individually unmute yourself and ask the question. One question that many parents have asked us, panelists, is about the concept of success and failure. And Dr. Pramit, when you spoke about, self-esteem and self-confidence, I think one of the reasons for that is that maybe children don't understand the concept of failure. All of us as parents and as elders, we always want to encourage the child, which is perhaps a very good thing. At least I as a parent feel it's a good thing to encourage a child. But how do we introduce the concept of failure to a child? How do we make the child realize that while, yes, you are the center of my universe, in the world, in the eyes of the world, there will be things that you will not be that good at. How do we do that?
So I think it's a good question. I think letting them don't protect them too much before they have to go for university or before something big has to happen. So in school, let them struggle, let them fall, because I mean, it's interesting that we're asking this question: how to help them with failure. Life is full of failures, right? So if you just let them be, every day they'll come back bruised, and you heal, help them get better. So I would say this might be coming because as a generation, we are less stricter than our parents, and we are slightly more protective of our kids. We used to ask our parents to encourage and to appreciate. That's what I remember my parents telling my parents. And I think as parents, we are now appreciating our kids far too much and calling them out far too little. And I think that creates while working in the US also, we see this, that there's something called a failure to launch. There's almost like a mini epidemic of sorts. And what is failure to launch? US parents are so nice that you are unable to, you've sort of gotten in the way of them being able to work with a tough boss, a slightly irritating professor. So be a reasonable boss, a relatively tough professor at home, so that when they do leave, they have dealt with you and they know how to deal with others.
Okay, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that we should be careful that we don't end up being too nice or too soft with our children. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Pramit?
Yes. Don't go to the other extreme just because,
Yes.
we wished that our parents were a little bit milder. We go,
But yeah, so how important, because I do know from what Ishmeet was saying, that as parents, we tend to reflect a lot of what we wanted onto our children. But when it comes to a parenting style, Dr. Sarika, like Dr. Pramit just mentioned, if my father was very strict, is there, scientific evidence that says I will try and be extra nice to my children, or is there no such correlation? How do parents handle something like that?
No, you actually learn passively from your parent. So at some point, you will exhibit some of the traits of your father in your parenting.
Okay.
So this is not something because your father was strict, you will be extra nice. You will consciously try not to be too hard, but in the times of stress, you will exhibit exactly the same traits. So you will be a more moderate parent.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, we had a couple of participants raising hands, so I'm just going to ask them to unmute themselves and ask a question. If I remember correctly, Robina Gupta had raised a hand. Okay, we have Sarika who's raised her hand. So Sarika, please unmute yourself and ask the question. I have to apologize. There's some issue as far as the chat window is concerned. So you'll have to unmute yourself and ask the question. We have a participant, Sarika. Sarika, if you can unmute.
She just unmuted.
Okay, but it's again showing as mute. Okay. Do we have any other participant? I'm sure there will be lots of questions. Please just unmute yourself and ask a question, please.
And I would also encourage as many people as can show their videos. It just makes it more fun and engaging. Yeah, so
Yes.
that's also a request.
Okay, so we seem to have a shy set of parents. The chat
I
option,
mentioned
I think,
that.
gives
I
a
think
certain...
we need to go through our list of questions.
Thank you, Anmol, for sharing your video.
Oh, there is Sarika.
I think you've broken the ceiling now. I think everybody else will also join.
Okay,
See,
let's
Neeta is
come
here.
on. Great.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Neeta.
So why don't we ask the first few ladies who've shown their video if there are any questions or any, and not, question is perhaps not the right word, anything that you have in mind. Why are you on this platform? What is it that our panelists can help you with? Please just let us know.
This is a free flow. No question is stupid question.
Yes, Neeta, please. Can you unmute yourself, Neeta? Yes, Neeta, you are unmuted. Yes.
I'm unmuted. So I think I have a question that probably a lot of mothers have. I'm a working mother, and I have the constant struggle at home that, you know, who's the villain and who's the nice guy between daddy and mommy, and I end up playing the villain. So as much as I try to, you know, calmly try to get things done, it's just always a challenge. So bribes, what else can I do? Yelling, screaming doesn't work. So what else can I do?
Whenever there is a parent who is not the villain, I think there is an untapped potential. Meaning that if you are a parent who likes things done in a certain order, who basically is running the house because they have more needs, everything should be clean, everything this and that. So the person who's slightly more playful, okay, or irresponsible, depending on how you want to call it, that parent is liked by the kids. So in tougher conversations, you take their lead, because they know how to uncomplicate things. They are less anxious about things. They are like, okay, it will be fine. So they are untapped in that sense. So I would encourage you to tap that parent. I don't know if...
So Dr. Pramit, what you're saying is that if out of the two parents, one parent is normally more friendly with the children, in whichever way that may get interpreted, you're saying in tough conversations, let that parent take the lead. Is that what you're saying? And
yes,
the
because...
parent who's normally more strict should play a supporting role and let that parent take the lead. Okay?
Broadly, yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Sarika.
I think one of the main things that I see is that you need to communicate when the tempers are not flaring, right? So you make a note of that episode in your mental note, and when we are in a good communicative mood, we sit down and you express yourself that these are my concerns, and the child expresses. So this is a two-way communication happening in a more positive environment, and that is extremely important. And that is one of the C's we were discussing: connection, communication, collaboration. And a lot of times we have to give up our parenting style. You know, we were used to telling them, do this and do that. But now we need to get into the style of, can you please do this? And explain, because they're developing logical reasoning. And like, why are you asking me to do this? Give them a solid enough reason, give them an adult reason, and they will respond. It's just amazing how they turn around if you give them a proper reason.
Okay, thank you. Nidhi Chadda, you've raised your hand, and after that, Amit Kukreja, both of you could unmute yourself and then just ask your questions, please. Yes, Nidhi, we can hear you now.
Okay, you can. Okay, I'm facing this perpetual issue where, it's like he has his own room where he studies, And if you enter that room, and you say that, okay, I'll sit on a couch next and I will also just, do my reading or sit there, he gets really annoyed and he's like, you can't disturb my privacy. And I just fail to understand that, how am I disturbing that privacy? I've just gone for like 10-15 minutes just to be there, So this is something which is, it's very difficult for me to also accept it. Of course, at times I try to just give in and say, okay. And then again, I would feel like, going back and do that. So this is something, what do you think is the reason?
This will happen. You are intruding on the space. Think of it as the older the child gets, and if you're sitting on the couch, the first 3 years, 4 years, the child want to sit on your lap, even if the sofa is empty, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But as the age goes, and especially after teenage years, right? Even if there is no space on the sofa, they will not sit next to you. They will sit on the sofa across.
Correct.
So they need to, what they are trying to do, right, is separate from you, okay? Know that they can live and survive after separating from you, identify that they are separate, and then come back. So a visual is, there's a boat on the dock. Dock is wood, boat is wood. The boat has to go into the bay, stay there, know that I'm also made out of wood, but I am separate from the dock. I'm a separate person. Then the boat can come back and forth and back and forth. So ye bhi chalega. This will continue for a bit. And it is hard as parents, but yes, your son is not 10 anymore, and we'll have to accept that. It's painful though. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I think I would like to just add on, Nidhi, is that give him his own space. He's going to an adulthood. So you need to give him that space. You need to let him be. And what is important is communicate with him as and when the time is required. Don't just keep on intervening. So give him that space so that he can come back and he can also communicate. We have to give them that confidence level that they can come back to us whenever they want.
I usually take
okay.
I usually take appointment from my 14-year-old. It's very simple. Okay, I need to communicate with you. What time can we sit down and do it? And we do get time to talk. That's amazing. She gives me an appointment every time.
No, I have to do it with my 10-year-old. I have to tell him that I'll talk to you when you are in a mood to talk to me. I cannot just talk to him when he wants to. So.
Thank you, panelists. Amit Kukreja, you had a question. Please go ahead. Just unmute yourself, and if you could also let us know if you're asking the question to a specific panelist, that will save a few blushes at our end as well.
No, Dr. Pramit, my question is to him. I'm the liberal one at home, and in my attempt to give as much autonomy to both my children, one is 16, the other one is 10, I end up giving them too much of their screen time, switching over from TV to laptop to iPad to mobile phone. And the 16-year-old has a much bigger, hook up with the screens than the younger one. So autonomy is good, but restrictions are not working out. There's too much of independence being exercised. Is there a way we can sensibly control this?
I think a lot of times the 16-year-old or the 10-year-old is also ending up doing more screen time than they started or they intended to do, right? Because one thing leads to another, right?
Absolutely.
So I think just having a schedule or a commitment that this is what I would like to do tomorrow or day after, this is what I think is reasonable. And then holding them to those reasonable standards, holding them to their own standards. So it's very unlikely that they'll say that I'll be stuck to the screen all day tomorrow. Or they might talk in terms of the wagon wheel. They'll say the first 3 hours I need to play a video game, the next 2 hours I need to be on WhatsApp, something. But at least if you can hold them to their words, that would be a start, and that would be bloodless, because you are not exerting anything. You are pitting them on Tuesday versus them on Wednesday. And you're also teaching them the self-regulation, because they have to do this on their own. So I don't know if that helps, but it's a start.
Yeah, and and as a follow-up question, it often is confusing for me too, because in their own discovery path or self-discovery path, you know, we are heading towards times where we don't know where technology would be 5 years later. So yes, giving them a lot of independence is good, but at the same time, I feel that keeping them away can be risky too, because they are, as you were saying in the beginning, they are in a better position to know and identify what is working for them the best and where would their careers be headed and what would they be doing. So it has become tough for us as well. I mean, where to draw a line, because we, all of us, want our child to be mentally equipped to be able to take up the careers of interest that are not known to us today. Like 2010, we didn't know WhatsApp and Facebook would be a career for people. Similarly, 2025, we don't know what new careers are going to come out that Mandeep and I will be talking about, which don't exist as of now. So some uncertainty around our own conscience of usage of time is also there. At the same time, some fear factor that there's too much addiction and there's too much eye strain and hurting their neck and back is also there. So just as a point that, you know, we often also get confused about how to create that sensible boundary, what is good for them and what is good for us to stop them doing from.
So one grounding principle for this could be that their functioning in day-to-day life should not get in the way. So if there is a birthday party, or if there is a family function, or if there are guests, or if the help is needed in the house, then they have to comply. If it is not happening, reasonable expectations of home life, they should be able to break away, because otherwise, yes, they might be the best at what they are doing, but they will have no social skills. Or no skills of living in a family system and dealing with the pressures of that. So that should be a good enough organizing principle. I don't know if other panelists have any additional thoughts on this. It's a good question.
But that's a good one though, Dr. Pramit. I think that's a good one that I can remind myself of. Some important chores of the day that they can pick up, some new responsibilities that they can pick up given COVID.
And try to keep these responsibilities as real as possible. Teenagers hate fake work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it should be real.
Yeah. I understand they're more eager to get into the real world than we want them to.
Yeah. And real work at home also. So do them. So when you're buying the next television, get them on for that. You decide the specs. We will buy what you like. And this is the budget, real work, right? Yeah. So something like that.
Sure.
Thanks, Amit. Also, panelists, there's one question which came up, from our participant registry, which is about comparison between siblings, or I guess there are quite a few of our participants here who perhaps are in a joint family. How do you handle that comparison between cousins or between siblings? You know, the elder one, I'm just assuming, till the younger one comes across, the elder one feels that he or she is the center of the universe. And then the younger one barges into that space. One of them does well in studies. One of them maybe does better at sports. One day, one teacher says, you know, Mr. Mandeep, your elder child is the best child on the planet, and the younger one has a long face. How do you deal with that as parents?
Dr. Sarika, you want to?
So,
I can
when you are comparing children, when you're comparing children with anything or anybody, it sends a wrong signal to the child. It sends that you're shifting the focus from the child's core to an achievement that is your need, not the child's need. Number one, it brings on stressors. The child gets stressed when they are compared. And, you know, sometimes it will give them a tool to, yes, work a little harder and get up there. But a lot of times it will just lead to lower self-esteem. The child will get, they will shut you out eventually. If it keeps happening repeatedly and the child is not equipped with the tools to handle that kind of achievement, then it will lead to child shutting out. Child won't talk to you.
But Dr. Sarika, tell me, okay, I as a parent have heard you and I will try and be careful, but how do I stop my neighbor or my taya or my chacha from calling up and saying, you know, till last year this was happening. So once it's happened, what do I do?
So see, there are two things that I explain to teenagers. There is an inner circle, and the inner circle includes the parents, the best friends, and maybe one or two teachers that they really look up to. Now, it is the comparison done by the inner circle that will bring about a lower self-esteem. Agar bagal wala kuch keh raha hai, most of these kids are capable of understanding that I don't care about it. And as a parent, you have to say, don't worry about it. Let them say. And you know, that is not going to bring about the negative self-esteem issue or shutting out. It is the people who is around him, who the child depends upon. If they are comparing the kid to older sibling or somebody, over wala cousin, dekh usko 97% marks aaye, that is where it is hurtful for the child.
Okay, so you're saying if someone, a third person gets into a comparison situation, as a parent, we should
Yes.
just support our child and say, don't worry about it, don't pay attention
Yes.
to it, broadly.
Yes. And you know, every child has strength. Every child has, see, we all have strength and weaknesses. And that is how I usually explain it to my daughter, is your strength is not necessarily that child's strength. You're better in some areas, those kids are better in some areas. And that is how we are different. That is how we are diverse. That is how we pursue different careers. And that is what, you know, that is where it kind of neutralizes the effect of somebody comparing them to someone else.
Awesome. Okay. At this point in time, I'd just like to reach out to all the participants. I was going through our, you know, all the registered participants. We have about 50% of participants whose children are in the age group of 14 to 18. And I think part of our conversation has been focusing on that. But we also have about 10 or 12 participants whose children are under 8 years of age. So if any of you who are here have children who are under 8 or 9 years, we'd love to hear from you. What are the kind of challenges that you are facing, or maybe you have a success story on how to deal with a child of that age group. Yes, Faryal, Kazi, let me just try and, you'll have to unmute yourself, Faryal. Yes, no, you've gone back to mute. Let's try this again. Can you unmute yourself? Yes, Faryal, please tell us.
Hi, my daughter is 9 years old and I have a 5-year-old also. Initially, I didn't face the sibling rivalry, but from past 1 year, I'm getting a lot of complaints from her, like, why do you help him? Or why do you buy things for him and you don't buy the things for me? But at 9 years old, I cannot buy everything what I buy for a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old. So this is what I'm facing at this moment.
And
So
how
I
do you
think-
normally handle it? Sorry, Dr. Pramit, before
No,
that,
no,
you
no.
just
I think
ask,
that's a better question. That's a better question. Yeah.
how do
Carry
you
on.
normally handle it?
What I normally do is if I get 3 or 4 things, like be it clothes or be it toys, I buy one thing for her and I tell her, like, when you were small, I used to get 10 things more than what your brother is getting. But because of your age, so what I do is I try, like, she will choose her own thing. But then it doesn't work always. Sometimes I have to explain her that we love you equally. Sometimes you have to do it more to your younger brother because he's small and he's learning. And what she will do is, just to get attention, she will pinch her brothers or like hit him or nag him, and it will not, like, we cannot understand it. He'll just keep on crying, and then we'll come to know that she's the one who did something. So I don't know how to overcome this thing at the moment.
Dr. Pramit,
So-
Dr. Sarika?
Dr. Sarika wants to say something.
There is a concept called time in. Okay, so this child needs, the 9-year-old is at a different cognitive level than the 5-year-old, and there may be times that you're too busy with the household work, or the 9-year-old probably needs a better connection with you. And a lot of times what I suggest is do something called time in. Time in is something about twice a week, maybe half an hour. Pick any half an hour, plan it ahead of time, tell your 9-year-old, कि between this time, you and I will do an activity together. And at that time, there is no bhashan, there is no कि तुम उसको क्यों pinch करती हो. It is a happy time between the mother and the 9-year-old. Okay, and what will happen is, if the child feels reconnected to you, she feels reestablished in that 9-year-old identity, she will stop doing these things. So no matter what happens, you will have to rearrange that half an hour that has been promised to 9-year-old, that nothing can change that special time between you and me. and you make arrangements. Somebody takes care of the 5-year-old, and you guys go out in a park and jhula jhulo, go on the swings, go out, eat ice cream on your own. I mean, not in the corona times, but do some fun activity together, the two of you, and that's all. Just do it for 3-4 weeks. You will see this will melt away like magic.
Also, I'll add one thing, that I think what the 9-year-old is saying is that I like the work hours. It's almost like the 9-year is a senior manager, and the 5-year-old is a junior manager. So the 9-year-old is saying he's working less also and all that. So you have to show the 9-year-old that there are more privileges, that you get to decide this, you get to decide this. You are a big shot. So you don't need the weekend off. You are big. So you need to work you are an important part of the company. So that sense, show the seniority to the 9-year-old, let her or him decide things. And that will complement the special time or the time in that Dr. Sarika mentioned.
Awesome. So what you're saying is that you make a special, make an extra effort to make the elder child feel special. We block out time with the elder child.
Yes.
Okay.
And also in this process, you will get the 9-year-old to help you also. So you will win on both ends.
Yeah, kids really look forward to that time in period with the parent. So it is the parent that they're troubling more should be doing it with them.
Okay, interesting. Faryal, I hope that helped in some way. And anyone else of this age group would like to ask a question? Otherwise, we have a couple of people who've messaged me a few questions, and I'd like to take those. Okay. So one question which we have is to do with, I think this is in terms of careers, but also in terms of how to communicate to children. So it's really about saying that, how do I identify what are my child's interests? How do I really try and choose activities which my child will be happy in doing? It could be higher education, could be a simple activity after school, could be career choices. How do the focus really of this question is, while I may take that decision with my child or help my child in choosing, as a parent, I'm concerned that my child should be happy with that decision, should not resent that decision. So would either one of you be able to, throw some light on this?
I thought Ishmeet would probably. Ishmeet?
Ishmeet, you're muted. Just.
Yeah. So I think what I would like to say is that what we need to do is we need to discover, we need to explore the options that the child would like to do. Let's not impose our options or our choices in terms of our career, that we say that, okay, I come from a family of lawyers, so my child should become a lawyer. All I'm just trying to say is let's just discover, let's just explore. What we can do with them is, if they like traveling, or if they like taking some responsibilities, or if they like to do some puzzles, let's just sit down and let them, try those options with them. Let them participate with them. Let's not get impressed that this is the career option that they should take in. We should just sit down. We should let them explore, because they're like Amit said, that there are hundreds of options available. So what we need to do is we need to let them explore these options. And what we can actually do then is we need to just sit down and then make them decide, and then shortlist those options, that out of 100, okay, 5 are the options that maybe they want to take in. And then after 5, we narrow it down more to maybe 1 or 2, depending on their interest, their capabilities, and what they would like to do, or what make them happy on a later stage.
Can I add something quickly here?
Yes, please.
That the parents are also concerned about certain things, about how much money or how much job stability a certain industry or a certain job has, of how long will this job even be a job. So I think there is a place to discuss that and ask the child back these questions. I feel if you're going to take a career that is slightly more atypical, right, it only helps if you go through those questioning through society, through parents, because that makes your resolve stronger. Because despite all the, not resistance, but the questioning, if your interest still comes up on top, then you're ready for this, right?
True.
And if the questions asked are responsible questions, like, do you think this salary is the average for this field? Will you be able to sustain yourself on that? Let the child come in and answer that tough question. So the process is important. Yes, maybe the child is being a little, I don't know, interested and not looking at all the aspects of this job. So help them discover it rather than do it for them is my thought.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Pramit. Dr. Sarka, anything that you'd like to add on this in terms of,
No, I think I'm still exploring career options. So why not? I'm in learning process.
Okay. Awesome. Yes, Ishmeet.
Yeah, I would just like to add on one thing is just don't let them make their career options basis on their peer group. Because at this stage, what they're very interested is that what my peer group, if my peer group is taking non-medical, I would like to take a non-medical. My peer group is taking commerce, I would like to take commerce. What we need to understand is what is their actual interest. We need to, again, your Dr. Sarika's 3 C's will come in, that let's communicate with them. Let's sit down and explore with them that what actually would they'll be happy doing it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, Ishmeet. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Pramit. Do we have any more questions? And I've just realized that, okay, Anmol, you've raised your hand. Yes, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
My question is regarding this whole thing about how you figure out the child's interests. So my kids are 9 and 5. And, one season we took them to football. Didn't show much interest or whatever, then you take them to something else, then you take them to something else. So somewhere are we, that whole thing about we are pushing the kids and they really don't want to do anything. They just want to kind of chill at home and watch TV. So my question.
Did we lose her?
Yeah, it seems like.
Okay,
sorry.
She's back.
Yeah, okay. So Anmol, what you're saying is that at a 9 and 5 or a 10 and 5, how rarely do you get the child to choose something that they enjoy? Or are you saying as a parent, how do you identify what is likely to be their interest?
So no, my question is that somewhere around me and my husband have this thing that you are pushing them too much. Like you are one
okay.
to the next. Let them, how do you figure out their interest? Because they, I think, have a very short attention span at that age. And, a little bit of hard work, when the swimming coach decides to push them a little harder, they suddenly back off, or football gets too tiring.
Early. Don't you think it's a little early at 5 and 9 that you're trying to figure out their careers? Because one of the things about adolescent age is that there is going to be a cognitive expansion. And you don't know what is in that child right now. That will come when the child hits puberty. And yeah.
So it wasn't related to career options. I was talking about how the parenting choice of, trying to push them into activities. But from where I come from, it's only to develop the interest. It's not to develop a career. Yeah. So is it okay to be doing that, or is it like you're being too pushy?
Like if I may add on to this, basically, what happens
a little louder, please.
Yeah, I said what happens is a number of times there is a lot of peer pressure coming from school group, families, group, where they're saying my son is doing this swimming and my son is going for this football and my son is going for violin and my son is going for piano and my son is, and then the person sits here and says, okay, my son is only doing one thing. Okay, let me put him into piano. Let me put him into swimming also. So in the week you block the whole schedule. And I come from a scenario somewhere, I say, guys, he's a child, he's still finding his bearings. Choose one or two activities and just let him be there, and then change the next month to something else till he finds. That's where we wanted some guidance. So how would you guys guide on these scenarios?
I think the peer pressure is on the parents, not on the child. The peer pressure concept does not come in till the teenage years. So for a 5 and a 9-year-old, it's not a peer pressure. It's just what parents are telling them they want to do. What do you think, Pramit?
I have a 5.5-year-old and I have personally struggled with this all of last year. And I think one organizing principle, because we are not that, we don't, personally, we don't want them to do a lot of activities, but we thought about this a little bit of what would be a guiding principle. Our guiding principle is, after they come from school, are they being gainfully engaged? If I am there, that is more important than any activity. So after I reach home, I want to be with them. If I'm going to do an activity, if they're going to do an activity, it will be with me. Now, in that time, is there time, energy, interest to do one thing, maybe to broaden their horizons? Yes. If the child is resisting, then maybe to measure a little bit of how much is the resistance. If it's a beginning resistance, you know your child, that they are slow to warm up, that after 10th day of karate practice they will enjoy it, then push it. But you don't also want to create a loop where mom or dad keep pushing me into activities, because then they will be averse to activities when they are older, right? So if you're busy, if you're not available till 7 or 8 o'clock, right, then yes, then the game changes a little bit, because then they have to be employed. Otherwise they'll just watch TV or do something that's not good for them anyways. So that, this is again a part personal experience and part sort of, I don't know, technical background.
I also have a story about it. My daughter was not interested in violin. So what I did was I bought 2 violins. So she had to learn it as a part of her school curriculum. So, and she was not interested. And the teacher told me, she's brilliant, ma'am. She has perfect, very wonderful grasp. And I've not seen a grasp like this. So I caught on to that. And I said, Anushka, let's learn a little bit more. Obviously, my saying wouldn't work. So I bought 2 violins and I took her to violin classes. And it ended up that I learned a little bit. She just learned because I was there with her, learning with her. And then we would come home and practice. And then to the point, 2 years later, I had quit my violin and she was on the stage performing violin. Oh. So modeling that behavior helped. Doing it with her. Sports, the same thing. Basketball. I said, compete with me, come run with me. So now she's a master basketball player. So again, the same thing. The child developed interest because mama was doing it. So it's a channel to create their interest.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think it goes back to a point that all of you made repeatedly throughout this, is that parents have to lead by example. There has to be open communication. And if we are going to sit down with our mobile phones and expect that our child should develop a habit for reading, we are fooling ourselves. And I really like the point that you made just now, that the peer pressure is actually not on the children. It's first on us as parents, and we feel that we should do something for our children because others are doing it. And perhaps that's where kids pick it up from. And which reminded me, Dr. Pramit, that you had shared this one very interesting slide with me. And I'm just going to put that out because I think it has a couple of interesting things for the parents to just mull over while we continue with our discussion. I hope all of you can see this. So, it says, what can a parent of a teenager do? So I'm just going to leave this slide on here while we take on some more questions. Okay, so I'll just go back then, panelists, to some of the questions that we had received earlier. And this one is, again, partly to do with the comparison between with children. But why I like this question is because it puts a different twist on it and says, my child seems to have developed some kind of, low confidence or, lack of confidence in herself. And from there, then comparisons are building up. So if as a parent, I notice that my child seems to be suffering from low confidence or low self-esteem, what are the triggers that I need to look out for, and how as a parent can I engage with my child on that?
Dr. Sarika, I think if you can help with that, because
So we had covered this, Mandeep, in my talk, and one of the things we say in teenage years, the domains that make them feel good about themselves are the social domain, social approval domain, and the physical appearance domain. Obviously, the ones that work in the earlier childhood, like academics and sports also work. So what you do is you identify the cause of the child. Why does the child think that he's not good enough, or he's not worth it? What is one or two things that a skill that the child can learn will make him feel good about himself? And as a parent, you guide him towards developing those skills. You provide him with the provisions where he's learning those skills. Once those skills are achieved, the child will go out and explore it in the social environment where he gets the social approval back from the classmates, he gets a wow from the teachers, and that is a very simple way to build up that esteem. It is not something where you can just tell the child, ki ye kar lo, don't feel bad about yourself. That's not gonna work. You have to work on skills, developing the skills on the child.
Okay, that's interesting. Dr. Pramit, would you like to add, or Ishmeet, would you like to add on this question?
No, I think
okay, fair enough. So the next question that I'd like to ask, and I think this perhaps Ishmeet, you'd be better placed to answer this. I think it goes back to a bit of the peer pressure on parents, that when is the right time for me as a parent to start planning for my child's higher education? I guess, we see all these advertisements of various institutes that say class 6 ke bacche ko ye tuition lagao, class 10 ke bacche ko ye, do all these things. So maybe this is a question coming from there, but we've had about 7 or 8 people kind of ask this question, that when do I start planning in a serious manner for my child's higher education? Ishmeet, could you take that, please?
Yeah. See, Mandeep, the ideal time to start planning for careers is from grade 9 onwards, but it's never late. You can start at grade 10th or 12th or at a bachelor's level also. But why I'm saying grade 9th onwards is because that is the time you can sit down and explore the options with your child. You can choose the various subjects that the child would like to choose. In today's time, the biggest thing is that whether the child should get into a CBSE or an IB board, that also you can start from grade 9th because it's a requirement by the schools. And again, you can, point out as what is the interest, what is the aptitude of the child, because at this point of time, when he is in grade 9, we have time to sit down and explore that what are the various career options which are available and what is the child would like to do at this point of time or later on.
Okay, thanks. Would Dr. Sarika, you or Dr. Pramit like to just add anything on this, that when is it the right time to start having the serious discussion with the child about the future?
I would say that more than a serious discussion, I think this should always be a question of what are you good at? What are you naturally gifted at? What are some skills that are not being tested at school that you're actually good at in the like in outside of school? So it should be a casual discussion so that it is not key 9th has happened and we have no clue. We already know. We already know that you're good at cooking things, right? We already know that you're very creative, right? We already know that you're an out-of-box thinker. So the cognitive, the assessments that we do, right, then become complementary to what the parent already knows about the child, and most parents do know about the child.
Correct.
It is just that if we keep this as, if people are feeling anxious in 6th grade, then between 6th through 9th is a great time to do this unofficial understanding of skills, and this ties into a little bit of sibling rivalry. Strangely, that I have a very radical approach to sibling rivalry. I feel that we should talk more and more about how we are different, like what Dr. Sarika was saying, neurodiversity, right? So how is the older brother different from the younger brother? How was the older brother different when he was at 4? Okay, but with the neutrality, he used to love vegetables but hate fruits. Okay, and then bring it up even further. So when parents come to my clinic and are comparing kids, I actually let the kids go at it with the parents. Okay, tell me which one is more organized, which one is more clean, which one is more laid back. So then I compare the parents, right? Because parents also have shortcomings and strengths. So then the whole family should talk about all of their weaknesses and strengths. And so the slide that you've put here, show your kids warmth and respect, because the kid is smart and likely like you. In many ways, some things will be like mom and some things will be like dad. So just everybody's strength and weakness profile should be known to everybody. It should be, you should strive for it, because then these things will become very easy.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Pramit. Thank you, Ishmeet. Any further questions from anyone? Or do you feel that our panelists have done, earned their daily bread on a Saturday evening and really helped all of you get a lot of clarity? If that's the case, then maybe, a round of applause for our panelists. And if there are any more questions, please feel free to raise them. We are all yours. Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to end by saying that if any one of you feels that our panelists can add value, and if you want to reach out to them for a more detailed discussion, you can just drop in an email on this email ID. It's parent@mindscan.edu.in. Mention your contact details. We'll get in touch with you, and be more than happy to arrange for a little more time with any of our panel of experts. You can then take it from there. Please also share your feedback with us about today's session on the same email ID. It will help us improve. It will help us make this a more purposeful and a more useful exercise. The aim really of this exercise is not just to have a one-off discussion. It's to really reach out to more and more parents who are facing these challenges. And as many of you would have seen, what our panelists shared today is very commonsensical, simple stuff. It's not about going for fancy jargons or going for some out-of-the-box rocket science kind of solutions. It's a lot of common sense and something which all of us can relate to, because that's how perhaps our parents would have dealt with us when we were young. Please share your feedback with us, and we'd really like to make this a much more ongoing and productive exercise. So any last word from any of the panelists, because our participants now seem to be out of questions. Dr. Sarika, would you like to go first? Any last words from you, then Dr. Pramit and Ishmeet, and then we can wrap up?
The last words are essentially, it's, each of these topics that we touched the very surface of today. We can really delve way deeper into it. I think we hopefully have done a good job answering some of these questions. But if you're happy, if you want to have any interest in delving deeper, we are available. Please use Mandeep's email and get in touch with us. Thank you so much for attending. Pramit?
1 second. So I'm very happy. I always enjoy these webinars, because I feel this is the right way for the parent community to engage. Because in one-on-one, it's helpful, but it is very inefficient. So I encourage more such discussions. It is you will have 1 or 2 questions, but you will get answered to 7. So I just want you guys to engage with these sessions a little bit more. It's very gratifying to me. I find it very meaningful. So thank you all for coming. And yeah, that's it.
I would just like to say one small thing, that please keep on communicating with your kids. Just engage with them in all the activities that they do, because communication is very important in today's time. And thank you very much for all of us for joining here.
Thank you very much, panelists, and thank you all the participants. It was great having you all here. Your questions really added a lot of value to us. I'm sure our panelists have also had their share of learnings, and I hope that whatever they've shared with you is something that you can take back and try out with your children. Thank you very much. Good evening once again, and have a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.